Next question is from Joan, and she asked, what is the purpose of stress in our lives?
Okay, stress is evidence that we are working with a transition, either a repetitive transition like a moon cycle, where we get more stressed at certain times of the moon cycle, or in our developmental stages of life. Stress is where the habit of the person is being forced to be different than it would like to be. So there is a good kind of stress and a bad kind of stress. Bad kind of stress keeps us in stress. A good kind of stress strengthens our ability to operate beyond that stress frequency. So stress is a frequency. It's like a doorway. It is a thing that we can go through. But if we can't go through it because we get activated by old reactions to stress, we go into story, we go into self-diminishment, we go into fear, then we can't go through it. So we end up in a condition of some degree of what I call existential stress. And don't feel alone and pregnant. Every single human being who has ever engaged in something that pushes them beyond their comfort zone has stress. And or many human beings live in a vibrational field, what I call existential stress. Why? Because you're in a body. Being in a body is dangerous territory for a spirit, because the body is temporary. It can be injured. It can have pain. It can have bad futures relative to the body. It has an inevitable bad future relative to the body called death. But the principle being is it carries a certain degree of reptilian stress. So there is stress that can be productive, and there is stress that can be debilitating. So the productive stress is that stress that comes when you're aligned with a purpose. And purpose could be a desire, wanting something, like wanting to meet someone new or meeting someone new. And the stress comes because you want them to want you as much as you want them. So there is this stressing. And that stressing is actually something to learn to swim. Swim in those sparkly waters of the unknown as something new may be emerging as you step out of the boundary of your familiar. Because in many ways, stress is more useful than comfort. So if you can recognize the role stress plays in your life, you'll see that it was developmental. That means you learn how to control yourself. When you're first learning how to control yourself, there's stress. After you've learned to control yourself, then there's less stress. It becomes more routine, like learning to exercise or changing your diet. Any of these things are stresses. Or going to school, or taking a more advanced degree, or taking on a new job, or, like I said, forming a new relationship. But on the spiritual path, of course, there's tremendous opportunities for stress because much of the territory is not related to something you already know. It's being conditioned by it, but it's not directly related to it. So the stress that we go through on the spiritual path is enhanced by the very thing that awakened you, by the very quality of energy or becoming that awakened you. So there becomes a bodily, horror, terrific feeling where you're merging into something you don't know, and the reptilian part of your human embodiment stresses. If you look at evolution, everything in nature is stressing. What difference with nature is it doesn't know, it's not as self-aware, so it doesn't know what it's losing. So it lives in a state of stress without looking for something more comfortable or safe or secure. But the body knows that there will be periods of times of stress and there'll be periods of times of natural relaxation. But the human system tends to hold on to things that activate stress. And therefore we get stuck in loops in transitional moments, like having an argument with a partner. And they carry on beyond the event itself rather than just be energy that we release and move back into our natural state. We create a story about it. We create evidence. We build our case. We have resentments, or we have projections, or we have our justifications. So we end up making a stress, not the positive kind of stress, but the negative kind of stress. Now, think of the first fish that crawled up onto the shore because it couldn't breathe in water, right? All the other fish seemed to be real comfortable in water. It was the one fish that was uncomfortable. And everywhere it went, it had a certain degree of stress being in the water. So one day it came to the shore and something in it said, well, try this. Can't be any worse. And it was better in some ways and worse in other ways. And in that condition of transition, that creature and its offspring were the first reptiles. So this kind of evolutionary movement is the purpose of stress. All right, because we think stress is bad, we add and get in the way of what would be a positive stress that would take us beyond the things that get stressed in the past. And the more you learn to be in the stress, the more capable your body becomes in holding the stress in a way that becomes eventually an actualization of the current of life in your awakened system. Because guaranteed, the force of Sat or the force of Satchitananda creates stress. So when you start activating that current, your body has to learn to accommodate and live with that stress, which the ego initially may say it's pain, or it's the thing I don't want to experience, or it's unwanted tension or stress. So you see, it is in great part, much stress is unduly perpetuated because of the lack of right information about the role it plays in our unfolding, both as individual human beings and on the spiritual path. Okay, there you go. It was a very short question, but it actually tapped into a very broad misunderstanding about what it is. That's why I always say the path is not about being happy, but I should also add happy and comfortable. It is about finding the right relationship to the existential stress that's already running you in such that it can be converted or released so that you can go beyond that limited capacity to be into a greater capacity to be.